Now let's continue. In this chapter, we will introduce two main different type of supply chains that are widely used within different type of industries, no matter in manufacturing type of industry or service type of industry, which are called efficient supply chain and responsive supply chains. So within each general type of supply chain, we will further introduce a few different type of models. All right. However, before we get into the detailed models, let's first look at what is the key difference between efficient supply chains and responsive supply chains. Here, there are two very important factors that can help us differentiate these two types of supply chains. One external factor, one internal factor. The external factor definitely is the outside customer demand fluctuation. The internal factor is more depending on the service or manufacturing product characteristic. All right. So normally we find out that when the outside demand fluctuation is lower, and also when the product characteristic is more standardized, it's more appropriate for us to use efficient supply chain. All right. On the other hand, when we find out that actually the outside demand fluctuation is a little bit higher, and also when the product characteristic is more customized, then the responsive supply chain is more appropriate. The underlying reasoning here is very simple. For instance, for efficient supply chain, all right, when the demand is less fluctuated, then you probably have a better prediction about the demand realization in the near future. So you don't actually have to hold much inventory to prepare for the unexpected event happening, because you have a very accurate prediction about demand realization. So that's why, since the inventory amount is lower, okay, you probably can make your supply chain as clear, as simple as possible, all right, such that the supply chain efficiency itself will increase. So that's why in those type of industry, for those type of the products or services, it's better to use efficient supply chains. However, on the other hand, when demand is highly fluctuated, and also when those products really needs customized and even need to interpret the customer's own idea, then you probably need more flexibility within your supply chain. You may need to wait for your customer's response. You may even need to discuss with the customer before you start to produce the product or provide this service. Okay, so that's why for those type of the products or services, or for those type of industries, the responsive supply chains are more appropriate. Now, here you can clearly see that I basically list four different type of models, which are listed either under efficient supply chains or responsive supply chains. Okay, how we differentiate all those different type of models? Very easy. Here, the key difference here is called decoupling point. What means by decoupling point? This is an operations management term that are widely used, especially within supply chain. But the key idea here is very simple. The decoupling point basically is telling us, okay, when this customer come to, let's say, the retail store, or let's say ready to shop it online, okay, where this specific product or services is currently locating within the supply chain. It's very intuitive that normally in a supply chain, all right, we have supplier, manufacturer, delivery center, retailer, and finally customer. All right. Now, as you can see here, for these four different models, all right, so the decoupling point for these different models are gradually more and more far away from the customer. Now, let's start from the make to stock model, which is nearest to the customer, the decoupling point. All right. So give you a very quick example about it. So let's say you walk into Zara retail store. Okay, you can directly see some t-shirts which are already presenting in front of you. You basically pick up one t-shirt, which is depending on color, depending on style. Okay, you can very easily pick up the one that you like most. Or if you do not like any one of them, you can change to another brand. That's fine. All right. So this type of the model is a very standard example of make to stock model. So basically, as a company, all right, they already standardize everything. They already come up with the finished product and show within the retail store. So for the customer, they can directly walk into the retail store, or they can basically shop it online, all right, and get that t-shirt very quickly. So this will be the example for make to stock type of the model, all right. Now let's move to assemble to order type of model. So assemble to order type of model, okay, the decoupling point is a little bit more far away from the customer, all right. In this type of the model, normally when customer order this type of the products or service, all right, the product service currently is still within the manufacturer's factory. Okay, give you a quick example about assemble to order type of the model. So suppose, all right, you're trying to buy a computer, let's say from Dell, all right. So you can imagine, right, when you try to, let's say, buy this specific computer online, normally you went to the, let's say you go to the official website, all right, and you want to customize one specific one that is fit for yourself, okay. Suppose here we have 4 different very important characteristics for you to choose, all right. So for example, they may have 4 different kind of screen, they may have 3 different type of keyboard, they may have, let's say 5 types of CPU or 3 types of hard drive. Okay, you basically pick up the most suitable combination for yourself. Okay, and then you order that specific one for yourself. So at that specific moment, actually the Dell company doesn't actually hold that specific inventory for you. All they're holding is the corresponding component. After they receive your order, they start to manufacture that specific one for you and then deliver to you. Okay, so you can imagine that for this whole process, probably it will take a little bit longer time compared to mixed stock model, because when the time you order the specific product, they haven't actually produced it, although they already have all of the necessary components within their manufacturing factory. Later on, when we start to talk about the mass customization concept within this specific chapter, we will detailedly discuss about why within those assemble to order type of the industry, all right, the company are more willing to hold the sub-assembly or let's say the components instead of the finished products in their factory. What is the key reason here? All right, we will talk about it just in a second. Now, let's first move to the last 2 type of the models, which are called make to order or design to order. So these 2 models, the decoupling point is the farthest away from the customer. Basically indicates that when customer try to order this product, the company haven't even started the production process. Only after they receive this order, they will start to prepare the raw material from the supplier and start to, get the sub-assembly, finally gets the finished product through their production process before they can give it back to the customer. Okay, so you can imagine that here for this type of the product, basically the waiting time for customer will be longer compared to the previous 2 type of the models. Okay, then you may naturally ask, for what type of the service or what kind of the products, all right, is more fit for this type of the models? Okay, the answer is very simple. Here, when the per unit product cost is very high, obviously the company is not willing to basically produce it and hold it as an inventory before any customer come to the retail store to buy this specific product. Okay, a very nice example would be airplane. We all know that Boeing company is producing airplane for global companies. All right, so only when those customers come to Boeing and order for a certain amount of airplane, the Boeing will start to produce the exact one that they need. Okay, so that would be a very standard example of make to order type of the model. All right, As to the design to order type of model, this is exactly reflecting another reason why the company is waiting until the customer start to order. It's because of the customization process, okay? Because in this type of products, all right, even if the product value, the per unit value itself is not that high, you may need to interpret the customer's own idea in order to produce this specific product. That's why only after customer, either communicate or directly show their idea about how they would like this product is presented or how this product is looked at. After the company clearly get this idea, they will start to produce this product or provide this service. And then you can clearly see many different examples actually show within the current markets, which reflect design to order type of the model. Now, after I detailedly introduce all these different models, either underneath the efficient supply chain or responsive supply chain, you probably get a solid understanding about what are those products or service characteristics that are more fit for the efficient supply chain or more fit for responsive supply chains. In summary, normally the more standardized product that having a more predictable demand forecast is more fit for the efficient supply chains. However, on the other hand, a more customized product that actually has a more unpredictable demand forecast is more fit for the responsive supply chains. Okay, so essentially, when the demand is more predictable, then basically you want to make your supply chain as efficient as possible. However, when those products or services, the demand is not that predictable, you try to be as flexible as possible. That's why you would like to prefer responsive supply chain. Now, here I list some more detailed comparison between efficient supply chain and responsive supply chain. But the key idea is exactly what I just mentioned here. Let me lead you guys to go through those different specific comparisons here. First of all, as I said, efficient supply chain is more fit for those standardized products or services, while the responsive supply chain is more fit for those customized products or services. Okay, and from the demand perspective, definitely the efficient supply chain is more fit for those predictable demand forecast, while the responsive supply chain is more fit for those unpredictable demand forecast. And also this is the main reason why we use responsive supply chain to still get the flexibility to deal with the unpredictable things happening. Now, keep in mind, since your product is standardized, right, then the information is more transparent between you and also your competitors, right? Then it's very important to keep your price low, keep your quality management level, and keep your delivery time as short as possible in order to get the competitive advantage. All right. On the other hand, for within the responsive supply chains, since those products are more customized, so basically in those type of the products, it's better for you to exactly understand your customer needs. All right. And also provide the enough flexibility, enough variety to fit for your customer needs. All right. Then further in the efficient supply chains, since those products are more standardized, then the new service, new product introduction, the new generation is less frequent compared to those products or services within the responsive supply chains. That'll be very intuitive. Okay, and also for the contribution margin dimension within the efficient supply chain, since those products are more standardized, right? Then, as I said, the information is more transparent compared to you and also your competitors. That's why the contribution margin itself is lower within the efficient supply chain compared to those products or services within the responsive supply chains. And also, as we already repeatedly mentioned, basically the product that is more fit for the efficient supply chain are those products actually has lower variety level, all right, compared to those products that are fit for the responsive supply chains. All right, now let's continue. Here I provide a figure which is a supply chain design for make-to-stock strategy, this can be viewed as a good illustration for efficient supply chain design. All right, and you can clearly see that within the efficient supply chain design, the supply chain structure itself is actually very straightforward, right? We always, move forward from supplier to manufacturer to retail store to customers. Okay, everything becomes very clean, very simple, such that it can really helpful for us to make the efficiency as good as possible. All right. Now, if we move to, let's say, this example of supply chain design for assemble to order strategy, this can be viewed as a very good example to illustrate the responsive supply chain design. Okay, within the responsive supply chain design, you can clearly see that the structure itself is a little bit more complex. It will actually include some circle inside this whole structure, okay, in order to be as flexible as possible, as responsiveness as possible, okay? So due to this complexity, the good thing is to become more flexible. However, the bad thing is that the supply chain efficiency itself normally will go down a little bit. Thus, it's actually fit for a certain type of the products or services. However, it's not fit for all those different type of the products or services. All right, now let's continue. So here, I also provide another table to further illustrate the comparison between efficient supply chain and responsive supply chain. The core idea here is exactly the same as what I just mentioned, right? Efficient supply chain is more fit for those standardized products with, more predictable demand realization, all right? However, on the other hand, the responsive supply chain is more fit for those products or services that are more customized with more unpredictable demand realization, okay? The corresponding operation strategy, we already talked about that, right? The make-to-stock type of model can be a very nice strategy that can be used within efficient supply chain, while the assemble to order, make to order, or design to order can be viewed as very important and very nice models. We can use that within the responsive supply chains, okay? Among all these different type of models, they have some differences. We already detailedly talked about it, all right? But keep in mind, all those different models are using to make the supply chain as responsiveness as possible. Now, as to the capacity cushion dimension, we already mentioned this concept within the previous chapter, right? And here, when we come to the efficient supply chain, also responsive supply chain comparison, we know that within efficient supply chain, the corresponding products or services are more standardized. And then it's very intuitive that basically the competition, the operational competition between you and also your competitors are relatively more severe. All right, then the capacity cushion within efficient supply chain normally is lower compared to that within the responsive supply chains. All right, as to the inventory investment dimension, we already talked about this specific aspect, right? And also, especially within the efficient supply chain, normally we will keep our inventory level at a relatively lower level, such that we can ensure a higher inventory turnover, transferring from inventory to the sales goods, all right, in order to increase the overall efficiency within your supply chain. But on the other hand, we normally will keep more inventory within our factory, such that we can respond to any unexpected things more flexibly, more smoothly. All right. Then, if you look at the lead time aspect, all right, in the efficient supply chain, we definitely try to short the lead time, but we don't actually want to increase the cost simultaneously. However, within a responsive supply chain, since responsiveness itself is very important, so that's why we try to aggressively short the lead time. All right. And then lastly, from the supplier selection perspective, within the efficient supply chain, as I said, the product or service itself is more standardized. So that's why we are more emphasizing the low price when we pick up the supplier. All right. And we definitely try to work with our supplier in order to reach a consistent quality level and also want to reach the on-time delivery level. All right. Then when we come to responsive supply chain, and then when we select supplier, it's very important to ensure that whether this supplier can deliver the, let's say, the sub-assembly or components fastly, all right, whether they can provide different type of sub-products such that we can, fit for our customization process easily and smoothly, all right, whether the volume flexibility itself can be easily to manipulate it when contracting or communicating with supplier. All those things are becoming more important within the responsive supply chains. Now let's continue. Here, this will be a very simple figure to link the supply chain design to process and also the service product characteristics. As I clearly mentioned here, you see, for the efficient supply chain, it's more fit for the standardized product or services. And here, it can actually reach to a very high volume when you go through the production process and also service process. However, on the other hand, for the responsive supply chain, normally it's more fit for those customized product, and the corresponding volume is relatively low compared to those products or services within the efficient supply chain. Okay, that's actually quite intuitive. Here, I also provide a figure which basically show you the comparison of volume and variability under either efficient supply chain or responsive supply chain. Very easily, you can see that within the efficient supply chain type of the products or services, right, the corresponding volume normally will be higher, while the variability itself normally was lower because those are more corresponding to those standardized type of the product services. However, for those responsive supply chain type of products or services, normally the volume itself is relatively low compared to those products within efficient supply chain process. However, the variability, or we say the flexibility, so this whole process can be relatively higher. Okay, so this will be giving you a solid sense about those products or services that can fit for either efficient supply chain or responsive supply chain. If you have any question, feel free to let me know. All right, now let's continue. Here, we further introduce a very important term called mass customization, especially within the supply chain process. As you can clearly see here, mass customization is basically a strategy whereby a firm's high divergent process generated a wide variety of customized services or products at reasonably low costs. So essentially here, we all know that no matter within different type of products or different type of services, okay, the standardization process is very important because it can help us to improve our efficiency. However, the customization process is also very important because it can better fit for customer needs. So that's why here we come up with this new concept called mass customization. Basically, make sure both the standardization process and also the customization process. All right, so basically we try to standardize a major part of the production process such that we can keep the efficiency within the supply chain as much as possible, but we leave other parts of our supply chain as a customization process such that this customization process can help customer to find the most suitable products for themselves. That's actually quite intuitive. But on the meantime, it may also help companies to reach a higher supply chain efficiency level, okay, or decrease their corresponding cost through this whole process. Why is that? Let me give you a quick example to illustrate. You may still remember that we mentioned 4 different strategies when we talk about, efficient supply chain, also responsive supply chain, right? Among all those strategies, the sample to order strategy exactly reflecting this mass customization idea through this whole process. You may still remember that I mentioned the Dell company as an example, right? So basically, as a customer, normally, if you visit their official website, they will allow you to basically choose your preferable, let's say, hard drive, CPU, keyboard, or some other options. And finally, okay, it will come up with a final product, and after you pay for it, then they will start to assembly those different components. And after they finish the finished product, they will deliver back to you soon. All right. So why the Dell company, instead of storing those finished products, they are more willing to, just store those sub-assembly. The underlying reasoning here is very simple. Here, for example, if you have 10 options for hard drive, 10 options for CPU, 10 options for screen, okay? Suppose you only have these three options to, you can pick up one specific one in each of these three options in order to get your finished product when you try to buy a computer from Dell. How many different combinations that Dell has to prepare if they prepare the finished product? How many? Very simple. Use 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000 different type of finished product. Okay? But do we have a clear understanding about for each specific combination, basically how many inventory Dell has to prepare? It's unclear. So that's why here, for a Dell company, it's very inefficient if they choose to store all those different, combinations of finished products within their warehouse. They cannot reasonably predict what is the demand forecast for each combination of products. However, if they only prepare those sub-assembly before customers start to order, all right, then after customer order the specific combination, as long as they can quickly assembly those from those sub-assemblies and then deliver to the customer quickly, customer normally will accept, delivery time, all right? And it will largely save the inventory cost from Dell company's perspective. So that's why here they reach the standardization process because they only prepare those, sub-assembly, but they also allow the customers to customize their own product. This is why the assemble to order strategy really conveys the mass customization idea within this whole strategy. All right. And of course, it reaches those competitive advantage through this whole process. For example, it's better to manage, customer relationship when we allow them to do some customization process, right? Here, assemble to order strategy definitely reach that goal. Also, it eliminates the finished goods inventory because, the Dell company will not produce finished goods inventory before all the customers start to order the specific combination, right? But right after the customer ordered this specific combination, they will quickly use their sub-assembly to get the finished product and deliver it back to the customer, okay? So that won't actually make some trouble. And the above is pretty much the core idea of mass customization and also how we connect this idea with the supply chain design process. Okay, now let's continue. So from now on, we will talk about the last key point within this whole chapter, which is called outsourcing process. As we mentioned at the beginning of supply chain design process, you probably still remember that normally within a supply chain, we will have a supplier, manufacturer, delivery center, retailer, and finally come to the customer. All right. Suppose you are a manufacturer within this specific supply chain. All right. So before you can start to produce the exact amount following your demand forecast, okay, if you do not own your upstream supplier, you have two options. Either you buy some raw materials from your supplier, all right? That process is exactly the outsourcing process because you have to buy some raw material from the upstream supplier. Or there's another option, okay? If you have enough cash flow, you can actually buy your upstream supplier as part of your company. Okay, we call that process is vertical integration. Okay, so here we will detailedly talk about the comparison between outsourcing and also the vertical integration. Okay, in what circumstance outsourcing is better. In what circumstance, probably vertical integration is better. Okay, so here outsourcing is very straightforward, right? If you are a manufacturer and if you want to produce some product which needs some raw material, okay, before you own your upstream supplier, you have to buy those raw material from your upstream supplier. This process is outsourcing, okay? Before we jump into the details of outsourcing and also vertical integration, here I also listed another two very important terms called offshoring and nearshoring. The key sense here is very simple, all right? So now we all know that we're kind of in the globalization process. Many manufacturers in United States, they are willing to work and also even own some supplier in another country, okay, due to many different factors. We will talk about some of them just in a second, okay? But this whole process, this moving process, this strategical process is called offshoring, all right? What is the key sense of nearshoring? Very simple, okay? When a company, they figure out their target, okay, no matter it's related to the customer perspective or it's related to R&D, aspect, okay, they set their factory which is near to the customer or near to the R&D process. This process is called nearshoring process. This is also very commonly used as supply chain strategy, okay, by basically locating their factory, locating their warehouse near to the customer markets or near to the R&D, let's say, institute. All right, now let's continue. Here, I'd like to point out a few important key factors that may affect the outsourcing decision, okay? So you can already imagine why currently some of the manufacturers in the United States, they are willing to work with some supplier or even own some supplier, let's say in other region or in other country, okay? Probably one of the most important reason is relatively low labor cost, okay, which becomes more competitive, right? The company actually can generate more revenue through this whole process. So definitely, this will be one factor that actually drives more manufacturer to willing to outsource through this whole process, okay? And also, some other factors is also quite important to decide whether they would like to use outsourcing decision, okay? For example, the product returns, okay? So even if the labor cost in some other region or some other country, okay, is more competitive from company's perspective, however, okay, if they cannot maintain a high quality level, okay, if the product return rate is high, this also will damage, let's say, the company's brand, the overall, let's say, maintenance fee, all those different things. Okay, so this factor also needs to consider a lot. All right, and besides that, for example, the supply chain logistics cost, right? As we just said, if we can basically set up our supplier, our manufacturing company, okay, near to the customer market, then we save a lot of cost for the transportation, for this whole logistic process, okay? That's also very important. Another thing is tariffs and taxes, okay? When the tariff and taxes between, let's say, country and country, between region and region is higher or lower, it definitely will impact the outsourcing process. So besides that, I also listed another few different decision factors that may really affect the outsourcing decision process. Okay, if you're interested, we can definitely discuss through it. All right, so here, okay, it's very clear that it's not always the case that by using outsourcing strategy is good for the company, no matter for the short term or for the long term strategy. All right, so here, before we choose the outsourcing decision, we have to consider all those different factors very seriously before we make the final decision. Okay, we do not actually want to pull the plug too quickly. It's a little bit dangerous if the company decides to finally use the outsourcing decision before they carefully consider all those factors that we already mentioned before. All right. Another important concern about outsourcing is about technology transfer. It's actually quite intuitive, right? Because no matter you're a supplier or a retailer, if you want to use outsourcing process, all right, to co-work with outside company, all right, normally you have to share some of your core technology idea with your partner, okay? It might be having the case that, your partner finally will become your competitor. So this kind of the technology transfer may also be another concern that any company has to think about before they would like to use outsourcing decision, okay? That's why for those companies, especially within the fast growing process, if they have the enough cash flow or if they have the enough financial support from the outside investment, all right, they are willing to basically own no matter their supplier or their retailer as part of their own company, okay, which is called vertical integration. Okay, so basically this is corresponding to the idea of process integration. All right. So for the vertical integration here, we actually have two different terms related. Very simple, okay? Suppose you are, let's say, a manufacturer, okay? If you want to integrate with your retailer, okay, by, paying them some money and own your retailer, this is called forward integration because you are trying to basically own your downstream firms, all right? But on the other hand, if you are a retailer and if you try to own your upstream firm, let's say upstream manufacturer or upstream supplier, this is called backward integration. Okay, so no matter is backward integration or forward integration, it basically depends on where you are within supply chain. Okay, whether you would like to basically integrate with your upstream firm, that would be a backward integration, right? If you want to integrate with your downstream firm, that would be a standard process of forward integration. But no matter it's backward integration or forward integration, is viewed as vertical integration. Okay, so here you already clearly see that basically we can use outsourcing decision or we can use vertical integration, especially for those companies within the fast growing within the expansion process. Okay, but which decision, okay, is more fit for this, that specific company within that specific circumstance? Okay, that would be a very complex, very important managerial decision. Okay, for any type of the company within any type of the industry. Okay, here we would like to use a quick example to help you illustrate what can be the key trade-off between using outsourcing process or using the vertical integration process. All right, now let's look at this example. So here, suppose we are Thompson Manufacturing Company, and we try to produce industrial scales for the electronics industry. All right, this is basically the background. The management is considering outsourcing, okay, to a logistic provider experienced in the electronics industry. Okay, currently, suppose actually we are in the vertical integration, process. Okay, so Thompson's annual fixed cost of the shipping operation are $1.5 million, which includes cost of equipment and infrastructure for the operations. Okay, the estimated variable cost of shipping the scales within the in-house operation is $4.5 per ton mile. Okay, so basically here you see with this vertical integration process, okay, the fixed cost is basically $1.5 million. The variable cost is actually $4.5 per unit. Okay, now let's look at what is the corresponding outsourcing process cost. If the Thompson outsourced the operation, the annual fixed cost of the infrastructure and management time needs to manage the contract will be $250,000. Okay, you see that basically here, the fixed cost compared to the vertical integration, the original one, right, is basically dropping down a lot. However, okay, Carter will charge $8.5 per ton mile. Okay, the corresponding variable cost is much higher compared to the original $4.5. Okay, so it's actually quite intuitive, right? Within the vertical integration, since you own it, right, the fixed cost that you have to spend, basically you view it as kind of the investment, right, will be higher, which is $1.5 million. Okay, however, once you own it, okay, you become a centralized supply chain system. All right, and then the corresponding variable cost is, you see, is normally much lower compared to outsourcing, right? Because within the outsourcing, although you don't actually need to invest at the beginning, you see the fixed cost is $250,000, which is much lower. However, since Carter, this outside company, they also want to, earn some profits through this whole process. That's why you see the wholesale price, the variable cost that actually you need to pay for every unit would be much higher. Okay, so what would be the break-even quantity here? Before we jump into the break-even quantity calculation, I would like to first clarify what means by break-even quantity. Okay, so the break-even quantity basically conveying the idea. All right, if I order this specific amount, it's indifferent of using vertical integration process or using outsourcing process. Okay, then how to calculate the break-even quantity? Very simple. If you look at the equation shown here, all right, break-even order quantity basically equals to the difference of the fixed cost, all right, between these two processes, divided by the difference of the variable cost between these two processes. All right. Since we know that basically break-even order quantity, since this is order quantity, right? So the amount has to be non-negative. So no matter you use which fixed cost minus the other fixed cost, all right, finally you will take the absolute value in order to get the corresponding break-even order quantity. All right. So here, as you can see, we have the vertical fixed cost, we have the outsourcing fixed cost, right? We have the corresponding variable cost for the vertical integration process. We have the variable cost for the corresponding outsourcing process. Okay, so you can easily grab those information from the information context and plug it into this specific equation to get the corresponding break-even order quantity. Okay, finally, this break-even order quantity will be 312,500 units, basically. All right, so let me ask you very straightforward question. Okay, so here, when Q is 312,500 units, okay, it doesn't matter you choose vertical integration or you choose outsourcing process because it will cost you the same money. Okay, you can definitely double check that. All right. But when the order quantity is above this amount, which one is better? The vertical integration is better, right? Because very simple, the more you order, okay, you can exploit more advantage from the lower variable cost, okay, from the vertical integration. So that's why when the amount is greater than the break-even amount, okay, that we show here, the vertical integration is better. On the other hand, when the order amount is less than this specific amount, the outsourcing process is better. Okay, so this specific example just give you some quick sense about the trade-off between vertical integration and also the outsourcing process. Okay, if you're interested, we can definitely discuss more about the comparison between these two processes. Okay, so this will be the end of this specific chapter. If you have a question, feel free to let me know. Thank you.